Where are we going on?
Taking a right, sir, and then right again at the lights, sir.
Okay.
Yo, sir.
Yeah, I remember the sub club used to have a guy called Graham Wilson going that way, who was effectively a soul DJ, and he played this Derek May record, Nude Photo. And I remember rushing up to the DJ booth and saying, "What the is this?"
What the goodness?
Weird record that sounded like it came from underwater, sounded like it came from another planet.
I moved to Glasgow in 1986 from Edinburgh, and back then, all these buildings you see around you were all black.
Unemployment, football casuals were a big thing then.
It was just coming towards the end of that whole Tory period, and it definitely felt like you were sticking two fingers up.
When house music came and took off, people just embraced it.
There was this whole movement which really engaged people, brought loads of people from different walks of life together.
It was a different type of behaviour that went with the music, you know, so yeah, it was a year zero.
It was just a very raw warehouse space. There was cans of oil sitting here, some of which was just sort of spilled over, so you'd kind of be dancing, it would be kind of quite sticky on the floor. The toilets would sort of continually overflow.
It was kind of more like dark and quite, you know, underground and just very kind of illicit feeling. You've not got the facilities, you've not got the money, you be creative. You know, that's what you've got to do to make it happen.
That pre-internet thing, it's just really hard to explain what that was like. The word of mouth, the excitement of going to the shop. You relied on these tastemakers, for example, at Avalanche.
Rubber from early on were bringing over a lot of the early Detroit stuff and the other US stuff before a lot of other people were stocking it. And they kind of gained relationships that I've carried on to now.
They were as important as the DJ. They were the one who was giving the records to the DJs going, "Oh, this came in today, think you'd like this one."
I'm sure you did the same, Keith. Phone numerous record shops around the UK, and they would play the records down the phone to you, and then it would run off and go, "Well, you might like this or something."
Eventually, I finally found a fax machine, and I was like faxing these labels all over the world, asking for test pressings, advanced promos, just so I could be one step ahead of everyone else.
DJing thing wasn't really aspirational at that point. You'd be just a guy playing records. You wanted to be a DJ for all the right reasons.
There was no agenda behind being a DJ other than trying to earn a little kind of more money so you could buy more music.
Found this clip test. Do you recognise?
Who are these guys on the left, actually? When you look at pictures from going out in the 90s, everyone's dressed for dancing, everyone wears T-shirts and trainers. There's a lot of corduroy kicking about in those days as well, but when you see people dressed up for going out now, it's like everyone's dressed to the nines and everyone's kind of in that selfie moment. Places like the Subby, you put trainers on because you wanted to go and dance, and that was the sort of difference, and it's like the guys that went dancing and the guys that went out posing.
We started here, it was 1988, it was right in the thick of the acid house thing, so I think we had like strobe lights and a couple of
oil lamps.
Yeah, there's a guy who had bought some of Pink Floyd's kind of old lighting equipment. There was the Rough Club upstairs, and then there was this basement. So if you can imagine somebody that had been dancing to some cheesy disco stuff upstairs would come down, they would just be assaulted by this barrage of smoke and acid music. And kind of, you know, it would have completely done their heads in. But the weird thing is, these people who came down 6 months later had completely changed, and then would be downstairs or would be in the sub club.
You know, regardless of what sexual orientation you were, what race you were, what religion you were, that didn't, you know, no dress restrictions. You basically had an attitude policy. If you had the right attitude, you got into the club.
Started hearing about this night called Pure, this massive draw for the latest techno kind of sound and acid and rave music.
It was 100% purely what we wanted it to be musically. And I think it was just a case of being in the right place at the right time, having had the right amount of experience, that it just from day one, it was a phenomenon.
That was the first place I went to in Scotland, man. It was really crazy. And that was, I guess, the first time I realized that it was really going on in Scotland.
When they were warming up, you just get this kind of and there was like smoke piling out the venue.
That's the building here that used to be the club.
The ritual was that you kind of came down and started queuing at like half an hour before the doors even opened. So if it was bucketing down with rain, you'd still be outside. Everyone was like jumping up and down and kind of like, you know, really buzzing and couldn't wait to get in.
My first gig was in Paisley, Club 69, for the Rubber Dub guys. They brought us over. That was my first trip outside of Detroit. And for me, that was an eye-opener. I was like, wow. They knew all the stuff. They knew Juan, Derek, Kevin, everybody from Detroit, Jeff. They knew all the back catalog, all the records we were playing. They were on it.
You kind of sort of want to stick with music that isn't everybody's best friend, you know, that is a bit kind of edgy and a bit different. And I think that became the genre's appeal in Scotland. The booth used to be behind this. You never used to be able to walk behind the booth. This was all carpet.
Sticky carpet.
You know, you would stick to the floor, always like ultraviolet, and the music would just be like, what we'd do is we'd probably keep it quite deep, quite atmospheric, up until about 12 o'clock, and then we'd switch off the lights and be like, boom.
It had kind of perspex up quite high, just to stop people kind of knocking drinks onto the equipment or throwing them at you, you know. And yeah, people used to bang the perspex if a good tune came on.
We don't bang the perspex anymore. If it's really going off, then this ceiling takes a hit.
The music was absolutely cutting edge. People like Richie Hawtin were coming to play live. Derek May, all these people, these techno gods I knew from living in the States, were playing Scotland. They weren't playing anywhere else. They were playing there.
They were coming through Edinburgh and Glasgow on a regular basis. As sort of young producers, you got to kind of exchange ideas. I mean, I remember like Dan Bell telling me, this is the machine that they used to use. So I went out and bought one.
People were just going off the chart crazy, friendly, packed, sweaty, just loving the music and really, really welcoming.
You had football casuals, you had students, you had kind of bikers, you had hippies, you had punks, you had folk goths.
A lot of different people from different classes in society mixed together, and just all certain people just let their hair down and got the smileys on and went for it.
Every other record was like the winning goal in the World Cup.
There was an anticipation.
At the end of the night, you would look at the dance floor and everyone was in this group hug. People that didn't know each other. It was very warm, emotional atmosphere.
People on top of tables, banging the ceiling. It was just an incredible time to be in your youthful prime.
Felt like it was your thing. It hadn't been like that before. Yes, it had similarities to, say, the 60s. But the 60s only really happened in some cities. It wasn't a culture across the country. And when places like Pure and so on, they happened first, but then it felt like the culture spread.